All right, my name is Jonah Puckett, and I had the question of what can these documents tell us about the impact of religion on society and about what the society valued. So these documents kind of dealt with the church and how their life was in the church, as well as kind of how the church had an impact on like politics of the time. And so in society as a whole, like even secular society, the church was kind of viewed as like the right hand of God, almost like an extension of Him in a way. So throughout some of these texts that we read, you see the church and the Pope giving their blessing on different projects and stuff that the rulers had, and that blessing was kind of made the act that the ruler did truly and ultimately valid in a sense. So they were kind of viewed as basically holy and as the ones that um, know God in society. But the society in the monastery itself, we kind of get a look at what they valued. So in this passage or in these passages that we read, you get a look how they you kind of get to see that they value up close and personal the things like work, prayer, and asceticism in particular. They also highly valued intellect, so they dedicated their entire lives to transcribing intellectual documents from the Roman Empire. Um, and they themselves would argue that they value the morals of God in the Bible, but this is just not the case. Especially in one of these texts, we see a monk that had 3 gold pieces, and he hid them from the church, like he hid them from his brethren, and his brother found out, and they basically just left him to die. They wouldn't go in and see him. They only sent his brother if he wanted to see him. And when he died, they cursed him while he was being buried, excuse me, in a pile of dung, and they threw the gold pieces in there with him and said, let your money perish with you." And we also see in another text from this primary source, we see a bishop command the mother of Duke Henry to honor the abbot that the church elected and keep him as an abbot, lest he feel the vengeance of Saint Peter. So really, what they say they valued wasn't actually what they valued half the time. So yeah, that's what I have.
Hi, my name is Sarah Moore, and I did the question, what can you discern about what life is like in these monasteries? Life for monks in a medieval monastery had its pros and cons. While they were expected to live simply with few possessions, attend services at all hours of the night, and perhaps even take a vow of silence, monks could at least benefit from a secure roof over their head. Another plus was a regular food supply, which was fancier than most of the medieval population had access to. Besides attempting to get closer to God through their physical sacrifices and religious studies, monks were extremely useful to the community by educating the youth. Monks followed these teachings of Jesus Christ in rejecting personal wealth. Monks were not usually permitted to leave the monasteries unless they had some special reason, and they were permitted to by their abbot. Silence was a method to remind monks that they were living in an enclosed society quite different from the outside world. Monks were not generally allowed to speak at all in such places as the church, kitchen, or dormitories. One might be bold enough to attempt a conversation in the cloisters right after a general meeting, but besides that, conversations were to be kept at an absolute minimum. Monks often used gestures, and sometimes they even whistled rather than speak to a person or a place they should not. Anyone who had broken the rules was reported to the abbot. Punishments might include being beaten, being excluded for communal activities for a period, or even being in prison. Monks had to keep the top of their heads shaved, which led a distinctive band of hair just above their ears. In contrast to their hairline, a monk's clothes were designed to cover as much flesh as possible.
I am answering the question, how does this information compare to other information you have read or heard in class or in the text? In the text about a life in a Christian monastery, which is run by the ruler Pope Gregory I, it talks about one of the rules he put in place and what the punishment is for breaking it. When one of the brothers of the brethren was caught with his own personal belongings, which was forbidden, he was punished for 30 days after his death until his brother of flesh, as well as his brothers in the monastery, freed him of his sin and suffering by giving of sacrifices. As I was reading through this primary source, I kept thinking about Hammurabi's code. In Hammurabi's code, there was a list of over 200 rules that were put into place by him to punish the guilty. Even though these two texts refer to the punishments that take place after a crime is committed, there is a major difference between them. In the Code of Hammurabi, there isn't any mercy shown towards the guilty. They are just simply put to death. While in the text about a Christian monastery, they show mercy to the guilty one and free him of his pain and suffering once they feel he has paid for the sin.